The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Pelicans Cast, brought to you by hoopball.com. We're providing in-flight insight for all Pela fans. I'm your host, Nick Guarisco, and I'm here with Pelicans expert Michael Pelichet, who has returned from a 2-week trip to Spain. Michael, how was your trip?
It was good, man. I wound up losing like 7 pounds on the trip. My sleep schedule was all jacked up, so I was waking up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and actually looking at the Pelicans scores and stuff like that. Didn't get a chance to watch the games until I came back, but it's good to be back.
That is awesome. You mentioned you lost 7 pounds, and that was only like 1.5 or 2 weeks. Why'd you lose all that weight?
Because I was in such poor shape before the trip. Because we were hiking. It was, man. We were hiking like 15 miles a day, and I hadn't done a lot of really besides like weights and stuff, I hadn't done anything like that in some time, and yeah, it feels good. Apparently being healthy it feels good.
That is nice. And the Pelicans cannot relate to that, right? Because they are certainly not healthy lately. But we're going to get into that later today. We have a lot to cover today. I'm excited that you're back from the trip because I'm excited to hear your analysis of the Pelicans. They've been playing better lately. I don't know if it's because you left or, who's to say. But the Pelicans started 1-7. And right now the Pelicans have crept up to 5-9, which doesn't sound good on the surface. But the fact of the matter is that New Orleans is 4-2 in their last 6 games. And this is despite all of these injuries, which we certainly will get to as a topic today. Before we do so, I kind of want to recap the week for the audience here. The Pelicans beat the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard, without Pat Beverly on Thursday. 132-127. Jrue Holiday finally had his breakout offensive performance, and he was incredible in that game. Derek Favors exploded too. 20 points, 20 boards, and then we had a stinker against the Miami Heat on Saturday, losing that one by a lot of points. And then we beat the struggling Warriors on Sunday thanks to J.J. Redick getting hot. The injury report for that game, Michael, was a real sight to see. Against Golden State on Sunday, the Pelicans were without Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Zion Williamson, Derek Favors, Brandon Ingram, Frank Jackson, J.J. Redick, Jahlil Okafor, and Darius Miller. And they still got the win because the Warriors themselves have been bitten by the injury bug. And then lastly, on Tuesday, the Pels bested the Portland Trail Blazers, and that was a well-timed game as well, because Damian Lillard sat out that game. So we missed Damian Lillard. We missed Kawhi Leonard in the span of a week. What a shame for the Pelicans. But that's kind of the least that the injury gods could do to us, seeing as we've had so many injuries. Michael, what do you make of the Pelicans' kind of recent run of success, despite all of these players being sidelined?
Well, I think so if you look at the season so far, there are so many individual things that were unpredictable, but I would say in terms of where they are, I don't think they're that far from where they really should have been. And we talked about before the season, their schedule to start the season was extremely difficult.
Right.
We didn't predict that Zion would get hurt. We didn't predict that Jrue would be doing whatever he was doing for the first few games in addition to being hurt. All those things we didn't know, but I would say that them winning now, I think, is more of a reversion towards what we expected. And I think, given the fact that they're playing easier teams, like they played Golden State being, nothing like Golden State ever was the last, whatever year, 6 years.
Of them former selves.
They really their whole team just got demolished. And then basically we beat Portland without Damian Lillard. They already weren't playing well, and they're missing Nurkic. So missing Lillard as well, it puts a lot of pressure on everybody else. We're beating bad teams.
Yeah, and they had
so
Carmelo Anthony too.
Yeah, so I think they're playing better, but I wouldn't I'm not getting excited about it the same way that I don't feel like I was getting really down on them after 5 or 6 games when we were actually losing a lot more.
Right. It sucked to start the season 1-7, but I think Pela fans have to be feeling more optimistic now. What's been impressive to me is, obviously we talked about the 4-2 in the last 6 games, but what's been impressive to me is that they are doing it despite all these injuries. I'm gonna reel off a list here, okay, of just all the players that have missed games so far this season. I was doing this calculation earlier today. Jahlil Okafor has missed 4 games with lower back spasm. Frank Jackson and J.J. Redick have missed a game each. Brandon Ingram, who has been one of our best players this season, has missed 4 games with right knee soreness. Jrue Holiday missed 2 games with a knee issue. Derek Favors has missed 5 games with a back ailment. Josh Hart, who was honestly playing like one of our best players, or at least one of our breakout performers, has also missed 4 games with the right knee and right ankle injuries. Lonzo Ball, starting point guard, missed 6 games with the right adductor injury. And obviously, I haven't even said Zion Williamson, who's obviously missed all 14 games with a sprained MCL. This is a laundry list of ailments that the Pelicans are dealing with, and it kind of reminds me of all the offseason talk we did about trainer Aaron Nelson, and it's just really unfortunate that this is all happening. What do you make of all these injuries?
Well, I think there's a few ways to look at it, and I think it's funny because there are people who look at it in the same way that if a team loses games that the coach is responsible, they look at injuries and say, well, the trainer is responsible, as if the trainer can control every kinetic movement of a player. Right. But I think there are a few things here, and I think one of them, obviously this is an extreme version of this because I don't think this is all due to this, but I would say that I think it's revealing to some extent the way that the Pelicans are treating the season. They're looking to develop their young pieces. They're looking to win. They're not looking to lose games, but I don't think they're trying to do it at the expense of the health of their players. And in the same way that towards the end of the season, teams often rest players because they're dinged up, I think the Pelicans are just handling them very conservatively because as much as playoffs would be a nice thing to achieve this year, I don't think they're going to do it and hurt their players in the process. And I think you're seeing some of that. And then the other part of it is obviously that not many teams have this many injuries. Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm trying to think back and, like, remember we've had some crazy injury problems for New Orleans franchises, but
No, not like this.
It's just nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts, man. If it has been, it's been a while, and, like, straight up, like, I don't think many teams deal with this regardless of how conservatively they handle injuries. It's sort of wild.
I think I have a theory for our injuries this year, and I was thinking about why has all this happened, and my theory is I have no scientific evidence to back it up, so you can take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, that's a great way to start a theory, right? But
yeah.
But my theory is that I kind of alluded to it earlier, we hired Aaron Nelson, who is supposed to be one of the top trainers or athletic guys in the NBA, like heavily sought after, like it was a great hire by the Pelicans. And he revamped, or he was at least part of revamping the whole Pelicans facility in terms of the weight room and kind of what they did for their off-season training. And my theory is this. I think what's happening is that all of the players were used to doing things a certain way. And they've changed up their workout routine because Aaron Nelson's trying to make them better, of course. I'm not saying it's Aaron Nelson's fault, but I'm saying they've changed up what their bodies have been used to for so many years. And I think that may be contributing to all of these injuries. Now, the counter to that, of course, is that half of these players weren't even Pelicans last year, right? So, but either way, they're all getting a new trainer, and they're all doing new things to their body and doing new workouts and maybe eating differently. And I think that can kind of take a toll, at least initially, on the body. And over time, of course, Aaron Nelson, we're going to trust him. He's one of the best trainers for a reason. Over time, I think the Pelicans will be healthier in the long run. But just initially, your body has to get used to all these new movements, I should say. And that's kind of my theory on what could be happening. Obviously, it's injuries. Some of these are freak injuries. But my overarching theory, what do you think about it? Do you think there's any credence to it?
I think there could be. I just can't imagine that this many injuries is just one thing. So, like, I think it could be like what you're saying, plus what I'm saying, plus a variety of other things that we don't know, including luck. Like, it's just sort of. I'm not concerned about it yet. The same way we talked about how we weren't concerned about Zion's weight until the injury started to prop up. Like, I'll be concerned. I'll be concerned if the injuries are handled poorly, and over the course of the entire season, we continue to see, players just getting knocked out again and again and again. Like, I'm not overreacting to something that's happening through X games because Aaron Nelson has an established history of being really good at this. Like, he didn't suddenly forget, unless Aaron Nelson got hit in the head and like that's what's impacting
sustained his
ability
own injury.
To, like, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think there's any need to freak out yet. I think it's all like, this is the NBA season. This is 82 games, and like, injuries happen and wins and losses. Like, you vacillate with how good you are. Like, you're gonna have off times, and all this stuff is just par for the course. Well, this is not par for the course, but I'll say that I don't want to freak out yet.
Yeah, well,
it's something to monitor.
The good news is that when you have all of these injuries, and I think it's fair to say that the Pelicans are the most injured team in the NBA. Maybe Warriors fans would argue that, but I still would say it's the Pelicans. What happens is now is we can have positive injury regression, right? As these players keep getting healthy, as long as the Pelicans can, as a team, can kind of survive the early storm, this early initial wave of injuries with our brutal schedule to start the year, which we've talked about, as long as they can weather the storm, we should see an easier schedule later on. Zion Williamson should come back, and we should experience positive injury regression here, or health regression, I should say, to where these players are obviously on the court longer. So there are reasons for optimism for the Pelicans. My worry is, and I want your take on this, because I talked about this with Patrick Feast, who came on as a guest in place of you 2 weeks ago. I talked about this with him. My worry is that if we can't weather the storm, by the time Zion Williamson returns, are the Pelicans going to be too far down in the tough Western Conference to try to really push for the playoffs? And will they kind of lean towards more of that balancing scale of player development that we spoke of?
I think it's possible. I need to look at the standings and get the exact numbers, but the Pelicans actually aren't that far out. I mean, there are a lot of teams that were supposed to be. I mean, Portland was considered a lock by some people. I thought Portland would not do as well because of Nurkic. That was one that I was right on. I did not think San Antonio would be this bad. I certainly didn't think the Suns would be this good. But I would say largely, like, I don't think the Pelicans are out of it. That's not me saying that I think the Pelicans are like a surefire lock for the playoffs,
No,
but I do think I think that the regression's there. I think what's been nice too about the injuries, this is always like a silver lining with these things, is that players know they're getting minutes, and I think that there's some truth to the fact that when you know you're getting minutes, some players might not overthink things as much. Like, they're going to play in a way where they know they're being leaned upon, and I think that probably has a small part of the reason like the Pelicans have been more successful recently besides scheduling. I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, the Suns are 7-6 right now, and the reason I bring them up, there's a couple reasons for it, actually. The Suns are our next opponent. We play them on Thursday, but the main reason I bring them up is because they currently hold this spot that we covet, right? The 8th seed. I mean, obviously we covet a higher seed, but realistically speaking, if we're trying to make the postseason, the 8th seed is where we're trying to be. The Suns are 7-6 right now. The Pelicans are 5-9. So despite starting 1-7, the Pelicans are really only 2.5 games back of the Suns. And guess what? We play the Suns on Thursday. So what better way to kind of get in potential position, kind of change your season? I know it's an 82-game season, but this game seems pretty large.
I think so. And if I had to guess on the teams that we'll wind up competing with, I would say it's probably going to be Sacramento. They've been playing a lot better since they started Rashawn Holmes.
That's true.
I think that maybe, I don't know. I feel like at least one of Portland and San Antonio is going to blow it up. It's just a guess. Like, this is not me having inside information or being like,
Yeah.
I just, there's like a gut feeling where I think that one of them's going to blow it up. So they won't be competing for the playoffs. And what I'm trying to say here is I don't think it's out of reach. I mean, Golden State's basically given up on the season. Oklahoma City, I think, is going to wind up like either just trading off pieces in the middle of it
They
because
could trade
they're
Steven
clearly
Adams,
going young.
Chris Paul. They have veteran pieces that could. They even Gallinari.
Yeah.
They could end up trading, but I think Paul or Adams is probably most likely, depending on how they're doing. Right? I mean, if they're actually competitive, maybe they'll be more inclined to keep those guys. I wanted to talk about. I agree with you in Portland. I think a lot of people don't see Portland as a team who could blow it up. And they might kind of scoff off this talk right now that we're talking about because, it's just a slow start, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to shut down. But I see the Carmelo Anthony signing as a real desperation move there. And I don't think, despite Whiteside putting up good fantasy numbers, I don't think he's near as good as Nurkic. I don't think Nurkic is going to come back anytime soon. So I see them, other than Damian Lillard, I mean, they have a lot of holes there in Portland, and I wouldn't be surprised if they blow it up as well. Sacramento's interesting because they get Bagley back soon. So
Yeah.
How
I think
about the Suns
Minnesota's
and the Timberwolves? Do you think that they're going to?
So the Timberwolves are more. I think the Timberwolves probably will. I think Towns is that good, and I think from what I've heard, I haven't watched them a lot this year. I've heard that Wiggins is playing particularly well, which is not. Wiggins was kind of like an empty stats guy, just like Whiteside is, and I've heard this year he's really turned it around in a lot of different facets of his game, like not just scoring more efficiently or anything like that. So I would say they'll probably stay. Like the way that I look at it, okay, so right now the Lakers, Rockets, Nuggets, Clippers, like we're not catching them. Of course, right? Like, unless something catastrophic happens to one of them, and even then, it's still unlikely. Dallas, like we talked about Doncic, and you talked about how much you liked him last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, and I think they're going to be good this year. I think Utah is going to wind up doing really well this year. So really, it's, after that, I think it's going to be between Minnesota. Memphis is 5-9 right now. They're tied with us. I think I think their pick goes to Boston if it's not, is it top 6 or top 8? So I think they might wind up trying to get to that place where they keep their own pick. So I really think it's between us, either Portland and San Antonio. San Antonio seems the most likely to blow it up. And then I maybe like, Sacramento and Phoenix. Like those are not teams that are clearly better than us. Like I think that there's still a chance we make the playoffs if Zion comes back and things really get rolling.
Right. I think that teams I can confidently say will make the postseason, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Rockets, of course. I think the teams that I feel comfortable, not confident, but I feel comfortable saying that they will make the playoffs, I'm going to throw the Mavericks in there. And you mentioned them already, but I actually do feel pretty comfortable that they are going to make it. I think that they've built a pretty good team. They got the star power now with Porzingis and Doncic, and they have a couple of role players that they're kind of rotating now, and they seem like a team that is kind of more ready than a lot of these other Western Conference teams to kind of, I wouldn't say sneak in, but they might even get the 6th seed or something like that. The Jazz, of course, will be up there. That is 6 teams, right? So I think those final 2 spots, and you mentioned it, like the Warriors dropping off and the Blazers dropping off, that opens up 2 spots that are regularly taken like the last couple of years. So, I see it. The Pelicans could certainly make a run. My fear is that these games, I guess it's not my fear, but my point is that these games right now actually matter a lot because I would hate for them to get to a point where Zion comes back in mid-December or January 1st or whenever it is. And if you're an injury pessimist like me, you think it's January 1st. But by all accounts, it's supposed to be mid-December. Let's say he's full strength by the new year, 2020. My fear is that they're not going to really be in contention. So these games right now really matter, starting with this Thursday against the Suns.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the whole idea right now is if we are going for the playoffs, I would say that we need to that we have a rougher part of the schedule coming up. I think it's starting. Like, it was obviously very hard to start the year. It got a little bit easier more recently. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher in the next few games. I think they really need to hold their heads. I mean, just like stay alive. I don't think they don't have to play phenomenally, but they need to be, at I don't know. They can't be terrible.
Yeah, no, just
And
a
if they
few
do,
games
yeah.
below 500 would be acceptable when in the Western Conference when Zion comes back. Because if you're a few games below 500, you can make a push for like a 7th or 8th seed. You can't be, 8 games or 10 games back. You have to stay. Right now, we're 2.5 from the 8th seed. You have to stay kind of in that 4 or 5 game range, in my opinion. You mentioned the tough schedule here coming up, just very recent. The very soon, I should say. The Pelicans are about to embark on a 3-game road trip journey. It's a West Coast journey, actually. At the Suns, we just talked about Thursday. The Jazz on Saturday at Utah, and they're obviously a good team. And then at the Clippers, who's hopefully Kawhi will sit that one out again. We'll get lucky there. That's a part of a back-to-back on Saturday, Sunday at the Jazz, and then at the Clippers. So at Phoenix, at Utah, at Clippers, 3 games on the west, pretty much the west side of the country within 4 days. That's brutal.
Yeah, and they also, they have the Mavericks. Like, even if you go beyond the next 6 games, they have the Mavericks, Suns, Mavericks. I guess the Suns are not really
No, but they matter.
My point is, they're really not.
They matter.
There's no bad team. There's no bad team on the schedule in the next, 9 games.
That's crazy.
There's not one.
That's crazy.
And a lot of those are road. Well, so let's see, 4 or 5 of them are road games. So 5 of them are road games. We have not been very good on the road at all.
No.
We've been, I think, a 500 team at home, and the road record's pretty rough right now. So this is a crucial stretch, and like a 3-game road trip. If you get 1 win, that's probably what you would expect. You don't want to drop all 3, and it'd be nice to get 2, but that would be asking for a lot, especially if Paul George and Kawhi are both going to be playing. So
yeah, and if you could pick one of those wins, I would pick the Suns game because, like we've mentioned, we've kind of conceded that the Jazz and the Clippers are probably going to make the playoffs. I get that it's an 82-game season, and I get that you don't want to pin a lot of importance on one particular game, but I think it's fair to say, at least, that the Suns game is probably more important for the Pelicans to win than the Jazz or Clippers game.
I think we have a better chance of it. In the same way that we talked about Denver 2 weeks ago, where I said I don't think we would beat Denver,
and then we did.
But it's also right. And I said you might beat them 15% of the time.
Right.
You're gonna win games you shouldn't, and you're gonna lose games that you shouldn't. But it's okay. I would say that the Suns is certainly the game that we should target as the most likely to win. And then if we get another one out of it, 2 out of 3 would be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be
I would
awesome.
be excited, but.
Yeah, let's go into the player spotlights here because there's 3 guys in particular since you've been in Spain that have kind of I shouldn't say, I think breakout is the wrong word, but have kind of had some noteworthy performances here. And we have to start with none other than Jrue Holiday here. He had his first offensive explosion, I should say, on the season. During the win against the Clippers on last Thursday, 36 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 steals, 1 block, 5 3-pointers, a great fantasy basketball line, but also it was just good to see him in reality breaking kind of out of that offensive slump. Now, at the time, the Pelicans were missing Brandon Ingram. So it was kind of interesting to see what Jrue Holiday would do with Brandon Ingram back in the lineup, but we kind of got what we wished for there. Holiday had another great outing against the Blazers on Tuesday, scoring 22 points, 10 assists, 5 boards, and a triple. It looks like he's back after that shooting slump.
Yeah, and I had on the Bourbon Street Shots chat, they had McNamara had a really good theory about why Jrue has a slow start to the season, and I thought it was really, really bright. He was saying that, one of the reasons we all saw it, but Jrue Holiday's handle was not very good, right? And we had talked about that on a couple podcasts. But his theory is that when Jrue is doing his offseason workouts, a lot of the things that he's concentrating on are not about his handle. So it takes him a few games to clean it up, and then that gives him the access that he needs to get to the rim and all these other things. So beyond just the acclimation to Brandon Ingram and all these other players and these rotating, because we have so many injuries, people are in and out. Beyond all of that, that was a pretty neat theory that I had never, I wouldn't have thought of that. I thought that was really bright.
Has he had other slow starts? I would find a lot of more
Yes.
validity in that if he's had slow offensive starts in past seasons.
Yes. Yeah. And so and one thing, this is we're going back several years now, but so one thing that really changed Jrue's effectiveness was that one of the first things they did was try to knock out all the mid-range shots because that's what Doug Collins pounded into his head in Philadelphia. Then we had Tyreek, who wanted the ball more than Jrue did, so Jrue kind of took a backseat to him and Davis. And then when Jrue really broke out, it was a lot of it was linked in my mind to Jrue was much better at finishing with his left hand at the rim. And he really focused on, you can see the switch. He drove left so much more in the year where he really turned it around. And I think that's what he's best at. He's best driving to his left, and then he's got a really strong body. He can knock off his defender and, pretty much finish. As long as there's no secondary help, he's going to finish at the rim versus his guy most of the time. But you have to get there, and I think the handle is a big part of that. So as long as that's back, he's already quick enough and explosive enough and strong enough to get there. It's just a matter of having the handle to do it.
And when Jrue can flourish offensively, he's one of the best players in the NBA. We know he's a menace defensively. He actually leads the NBA with 56 deflections, and he's missed 2 games. And he's 4th in steals. He gets good strong block numbers for his position. Jrue Holiday obviously is one of the best defenders in the NBA. So when he's kind of lights out offensively like he has been in the last 2 games, I mean, we're kind of seeing that. I know it was kind of embellishment. We're kind of seeing that MVP candidate talk that David Griffin was saying this offseason, even though it was likely just to take pressure off Zion, of course. But we're kind of finally seeing him play up to that level as a candidate, at least.
He's playing a lot better. I think some of it too is a shooting regression. He was shooting so poorly from 3, that was bound to not be that way forever.
Right.
He's such an interesting 3-point shooter. Even his step backs to me, this is probably, I hope this is not a mischaracterization, but most people when they step back, their body is turned a certain way. Jrue is actually facing the goal his chest is when he steps back. It just makes it a really interesting shot, and he's always had that thing where he kind of stutters into a shot where the way I explained it on one of those podcasts was I guess I'm doing this, he kind of doesn't even really want to, but I mean, so he's not an amazing 3-point shooter, but he's not a terrible one, and so he wasn't going to shoot below 30% or whatever forever. And I think you're seeing some of that come back as he's at 31% from 3 right now, which is still bad, but I think it's going to go up as the season progresses.
Right. I mean, it's great to see because it kind of gives you a glimpse at, especially when he does it with Ingram in the lineup, you can kind of get a glimpse at what this team could potentially be if Jrue and Ingram and Zion are all in their games. I mean, those are 3 real powerhouses right there potentially.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Jrue, we talk about our team's success, a lot of it was just that Jrue was not playing well at all. You can't win games when we were counting on Jrue being better than he's been, and he was markedly worse. Again, he does start slow to seasons pretty frequently, so it probably is something I should have considered. But
yeah, but he's your best player, and he's not as important as a quarterback is in football, but he is your quarterback of your team, especially since he's been a New Orleans Pelican for so long, way longer than all these other new players that we have. He's essentially the quarterback on the court, especially with Lonzo, the starting point guard, being out. So I mean, for lack of better words, he's your quarterback and he's your best player. And when your best player isn't playing well, it's hard to win.
Yeah, I think so.
Jaxon Hayes, right? We got to talk about him. More playing time lately, and yes, we will caveat this by saying just initially that this playing time is of course coming because Derek Favors has been out. Jahlil Okafor has been out as well. So substantial injuries to the front court. Obviously, Zion Williamson out too. Substantial injuries to the front court. So Jaxon Hayes has been seeing a lot more playing time than expected. He got the first start of his career against the Golden State Warriors on Saturday. 10 points, 10 boards, a steal, and 3 blocks. He followed that up with a 9.7 rebound game against Portland on Tuesday with 2 steals and 3 blocks. Like I said, all the injuries to the front court. Hayes is actually averaging 25 minutes in his last 3 games, and he's actually blocked 8 shots in his last 3. So I like what I'm seeing from Hayes as a rim protector. It still looks like he kind of needs to add strength, and he's not quite there defensively. What's your take on Jaxon Hayes?
So I'm still wanting to see more film on defense, because I think the defense is getting better. Like, he was really lost to start the year, and I think it is getting better. I want to see more before I get too excited about it. What I really see is I see what appears to me to be sustainable is that Jaxon Hayes is just a phenomenal rim runner, and we knew he was going to be able to dunk and all that stuff, so it's not like it was a surprise. But what's really blown me away is the variety of ways that he can finish at the rim. Like, he can finish through contact. He's very, very, he's just a really good finisher at the rim. And combined with the fact that he has the motor that he has and the athleticism and the length that he has, I don't have any doubt that he's going to wind up being a very valuable offensive player. And then on defense, what I do see is I think the mobility is clearly there. Whether or not, that he will wind up becoming an elite rim protector both on the ball and as a secondary guy, I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough to justify it. One thing that does concern me, this is so early in his career, I'm not going to freak out about it, but Davis is one of those guys where it was an aberration, but he was basically blocking more shots than he was fouling. And with Hayes, it's sort of the opposite. So Hayes right now is blocking about
Jaxon Hayes is the second player I kind of want to spotlight
per
here,
36
he's
minutes.
seen
He has
a lot more
5.7
playing time
fouls
lately.
So,
and I want to caveat that, of course, by saying that the only reason he's getting this playing time is Derek Favors has been out, Jahlil Okafor has been out, and, of course, Zion Williamson has been out. So there's a lot of injuries on our front court right now. But Jaxon Hayes got the first start of his career against the Golden State Warriors on Saturday. 10 points, 10 boards, 1 steal, and 3 blocks. He followed that up with a 9.7 rebound game versus Portland on Tuesday with 2 steals and 3 blocks. And because of all the injuries to the front court, Hayes has actually averaged 25 minutes in his last 3 games, and he's blocked 8 shots in his last 3. So I'm kind of liking what I'm seeing from Hayes as a rim protector, but it still looks like he kind of needs to add strength, and he's kind of getting a little pushed around defensively. What are your thoughts on Hayes?
So what I've seen so far and what's been clear to me is that I am a lot more confident at this point in what Hayes is going to be offensively than I am defensively. And I don't mean that to say that he won't ever become a very good defender at all. What I'm saying is, in terms of repeatability, it's very clear to me that we already knew Hayes was going to be able to rim run and to do that, but it's beyond dunking. He can finish through contact. I think he's creative in how he finishes. He's got a soft touch around the rim. He's obviously got the athletic ability that, there's just not a lot of guys who can move and jump like he can at his height and his length. But all of that stuff's really good to me. I think defensively, I want to see more. I think he's improving. I think he's more aware than he was at the beginning of the year, where he was sort of running around without any. This is a rookie, so this is what we would expect. But I want to see the continued development there. And one thing that does, again, it's not a concern because we're too early to be freaking out over stuff. But so, a great shot blocker is going to be able to block shots without fouling. And so right now, Hayes is blocking a lot of shots, about 2.3 per 36, but he's also basically fouling. If he played all 36, well, not all 36, but if he played a 36-minute, 36 minutes a night, he would basically be fouling out every night. He's averaging 5.7 fouls per 36.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's things to clean up. There's things to be excited about, though, and I think the fact that, we had talked about before, we didn't expect him to be playing, nor did he really, I'm sure, given that all these guys had to get injured for him to play more minutes, but I think there are good things, and it's exciting to think about how athletic a front court would be with, a more mature and stronger Jaxon Hayes and Zion Williamson.
Lots of young shot blockers seem to be struggling with fouls lately. Jaren Jackson and Wendell Carter come to mind. Mitchell Robinson for the Knicks. It seems like, some of them figure it out and some of them don't. Are you worried that this is something that Jaxon Hayes might not ever really be able to figure out?
Say that one more time.
Are you worried that Jaxon Hayes might not ever be able to figure out how kind of not to foul, how to prevent those?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he seems to be a pretty intelligent guy. I really do think that Jaxon Hayes is going to figure a lot of those defensive things out. I think, one of the biggest things that concerns me beyond what we've talked about is actually his defensive rebounding rate, because that's typically something that I don't think like if he's going to get better defensive rebounding, it's probably going to be because his frame fills out. So it's it's possible. But right now, like he's he's actually defending, he's rebounding fewer misses from the opponents, like per miss than Josh Hart is, which is like,
Wow.
I mean, it's not concerning yet, but it's like something to be looking out for. I think the shot blocking and stuff will come with time, but I there's a certain element to it, man, where like I think the best shot blockers just kind of have it, and so like there's a difference between being Rudy Gobert, but like there are people who are like you can be a good shot blocker without being Rudy Gobert. So will he become Rudy Gobert? I don't think so. I haven't seen anything to indicate that. But is he a guy who can get you 2 blocks a night? Yeah, absolutely. He's already doing it. Really, he just needs to cut down the fouls.
Right, and a guy who is getting a ton of rebounds, who's kind of taking over that Josh Hart role on the offensive and defensive glass, is Kenrich Williams. He's getting a lot of minutes as the starter with all the injuries. He's played. Alvin Gentry mentioned that he actually really likes him in the starting lineup a couple of games ago, and he's played over 31 minutes in each of the last 5 contests. He has not scored in double figures in any of these contests, but he's recorded double-digit rebounds in 4 of the last 5 games. So he's kind of all over the boards, and he also contributes a few assists. He has 7 steals in the last 5 games, 3 blocks in that span, and 7 triples as well. So I know he's not a big name, and he's obviously not a big-time scorer by any means, but he does fill up the box score in other ways, all those peripheral stats and defensive numbers. And I think a lot of his production is due to his hustle. I think he's earned the nickname Kenny Hustle for a reason. And I just kind of wanted to give a shout out to Kenrich Williams here because he seems to be kind of taking over that Josh Hart reserve role where, great at nothing, solid at everything, but that type of bench player that kind of every team needs to do the scrappy things and kind of pick up the slack and do some of the dirty work.
Yeah, I think, so I don't have like a strong opinion about Kenrich Williams. I think he's a solid role player, like you're saying. I think it's needed, right? Like you need glue guys on your team. We happen to have a lot of guys who can put up points. We have Ingram, we have Jrue, we'll have Zion when he gets back. Even if someone like Frank Jackson puts up a lot of points on a per minute basis, but we really don't have a lot of guys to fill in all those gaps, I don't think. And so Kenrich is a guy who, like you're saying, if you can help on the boards, which is a big deal. He's actually been a very good offensive rebounder and defensive rebounder this year for us, and that's nice because he's creating extra possessions for our offense, and he's also helping us do what we've really struggled to do, which is to close defensive ones. So like there are things there that I'm happy about it. Like I think he helps our team. And I think he kind of holds things together, but I don't get psyched up about someone like Kenrich Williams beyond, oh, it's nice to see someone hustling and doing the little things the same way, like you're saying, that Josh Hart was doing it.
Right. It was Williams and it was Christian Wood last year that kind of sparked down the stretch for the Pelicans when the season was kind of lost. And we knew some players were going to step up. I know Elfrid Payton kind of had a nice little run there, at least statistically as well. But Williams and Christian Wood were the guys who kind of just came out of the woodwork, pun intended there. And yeah,
I'm going to let that one go. Keep going.
Yeah. And they kind of, I wouldn't say thrived, but they definitely put the league on notice that they could potentially play. Now the Pelicans decided to keep Williams, and they decided to let Wood go. Wood ends up as a backup to, I think, Drummond in Detroit, or a backup to Griffin in Detroit, and it kept Williams. And I certainly am glad that Williams is on the roster. Now, I didn't think he was going to be playing 31 minutes a night, and that's just what happens when you have all these injuries that we've discussed. But I'm certainly glad that he kind of stuck with the Pelicans. And remember, Michael, when who was it that we had on? When we had one of the Pels insiders who covers the team on, and he talked about, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he talked about how Kenrich Williams was kind of one of the glue guys in the locker room as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a good culture. I think there are a lot of guys who, I mean, I don't know enough about the team's inner workings to say definitively that that's the case. But like you're saying, if that's what's reported, that Kenrich is a guy who holds a locker room together as well. Like, it's just a great guy to have. I mean, like we can talk about it. Sometimes it's funny, like, we talk about players who are so far on, one side of the spectrum, players who are playing extremely poorly or extremely well. And it's typically the guys that are in the limelight more often. But, these players that are they're not like sort of just there, but they kind of are, right? Like it's like they're helping in like really sort of like small ways, and it all adds up. And those are players. Yeah.
I think what you're trying to say is what you're getting out of Kenrich Williams every night, and a guy like kind of Josh Hart and Kenrich Williams, and that's kind of refreshing in a sense, because other players who are who are even better at basketball, who are more prominent, can have off nights, and that's what the media is going to focus on, of course. But it seems like Williams has been a steady force of those peripheral stats and doing those things that not a lot of players can do, that don't necessarily show up in the box score. But I should say that a lot of Williams, hustle plays that Williams is performing, are showing up in the box score, actually. I mean, he is getting steals, he is getting triples, he is getting rebounds. He had, I think, 13 or 14 rebounds last night, which, is pretty impressive. So I think Williams definitely deserves a shout out from us on this pod here, as, for playing well, having that spotlight on him.
I agree. Yeah, and like little things too. I think there's something to be said for someone who doesn't need a lot of shots. So he's like, the way he's contributing is in ways that we need, and he's also not requiring the ball a whole lot. Like he's actually averaging under 10 points per game per 36 minutes.
Yeah.
And and a lot of his shots are threes, but and he also doesn't turn the ball over, which, that's nice when you make a lot of dumb decisions. So our team does sometimes, I should say.
Yeah, I would imagine that he has one of the higher, I'm not sure, but I would imagine he has one of the higher plus minuses, or at least he's up there in the most efficient players. I guess I should say that the Pelicans are more efficient when he's on the court.
Probably, yeah. I need to look more into those stats because I don't want to speak without looking it up,
and we will do that. That'll pretty much do it for this podcast. I think it's going to wrap it up. The Pelicans do have that West Coast road trip that we talked about. We're going to play at Phoenix on Thursday, at the Utah Jazz on Saturday, and at the Los Angeles Clippers on Sunday. That last part being part of a back-to-back. Hopefully we can get one of those games. 2 out of 3 would be gravy. It's a brutal 3-game stretch, though. But, the Pelicans are picking it up lately. So we'll see what happens there. And hopefully some of our players come back from injury, right? I mean, that's the main thing we really want. But thank you guys so much for listening in to the Pelicans Cast, the official podcast of hoopball.com, in-flight insight for all Pela fans. Hey, as a reminder, if you like what you heard today, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or whatever your podcast provider is. You can follow Pelashe on Twitter at Mike_Pelicans. I'm at Fantasy Law Guy. And please check out Hoopball for all your NBA and fantasy basketball needs. See you next week.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.